We're going to talk about sort of so social inclusion startups, but from like at the startups perspective. My day job is as a journalist with TechCrunch, covering crazy VC-backed startups and stuff like that, and increasingly blockchain. What can we do in that ecosystem to, answer the needs of refugees and displaced people? And what I thought, let's first of all hear what everybody's doing briefly, because I know Chatterbox is actually addressing this, directly as a startup, basically. Aren't you, Lena?
We are indeed, Mike. So for anyone who doesn't know, Chatterbox is a social startup founded by refugees in the UK. We train and employ refugees to teach their skills. It could be their native language, professional insights, cultural insights online.
Fantastic. And Ahmed, and you're working with Techstars and Jussur. Techstars, obviously, for those of you who don't know, Techstars is a global accelerator. But Jussur, I know less about. Tell us more about that.
Sure. Probably leave it to Grace to talk about Jussur. I feel like so much connected actually to the panel because I'm also part of board member of TechFugees, also part of Jussur. I know the founder very well, so I feel like I'm much connected to everyone.
You can tell us where we're all going wrong.
Yeah, so I'll be like, what?
Right.
So fast checking
Be gentle.
everything. But I'll leave this just for Jussur, but also like talk about other stuff that I do have to do with the refugees might be interesting for the people. So I'm working on a book that will be published in 2 weeks. This is not an advertising for the book. It's a book for free, so no need for advertising.
You're going to release a free book.
Free book that dedicated to actually overview the status quo of the Syrian refugees entrepreneurs, what they have been doing. So I've been traveling for 10 countries, meeting more than 350 refugees entrepreneurs, learning about the challenges they are facing, about them. So all of them in one place that you will find it soon. But you can tell us about Jussur. You better speak about it.
Okay, you can tell us about Jussur. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Of course. So hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting us here today.
Pleasure.
So Jussur means bridges in Arabic. And our main mission is to kind of bridge the Syrians all over the world, the Syrian kind of refugee community and diaspora community with decent education and livelihood opportunities. We're doing this in many different ways. We have a scholarship program, we have an education program in Lebanon, but I think what we'd really love to talk to you here today about is our entrepreneurship program. We've been running for the past 6 years a competition and a training boot camp for Syrian entrepreneurs, mainly in Lebanon, but also, for example, we did it in Berlin 1 year. And then just this autumn, in fact, we've just completed a roadshow where we went to 5 Middle Eastern cities in Iraq, in Jordan, in Lebanon, and in Turkey. Ahmed was actually one of the people down on the ground. And we're training then Syrians with startup ideas, how to create a business plan, how to create a financial plan, finally for them to pitch in front of investors. And we ourselves also give startup funding. So just to give you an idea of where we are to date, this is 6 years later. We've invested in over 180 Syrian startups with over $250,000 worth of training and financial prizes. And I think, in fact, that makes us one of the biggest organizations working with Syrian startups.
And how are you backed? How are you backed at the moment?
A combination of many different kind of partnerships, as I'm sure you can imagine. We're great at bringing on independent investors and kind of private sector.
Is it philanthropic investors, or are they looking for returns?
At the moment, it's purely philanthropic.
Okay.
I'm really bad at this.
Philanthropic.
Exactly.
I know, it's a tough one. Just, what's your personal story?
Sure, personal story. How much time do we have? Talking about born and lived in Syria my whole life. I got excited about entrepreneurship. Started my first startup in 2010 about customizing gift, and then war started in 2011, which is the worst idea you do is selling customized gift in a war. We got.
That's a kind of tough business model.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Bad timing. So we filed bankruptcy. We failed. We killed the company. Moved to work on building the startup ecosystem. The things that motivate me the most is actually when I was in Syria 2013, 72% at that time of the Syrian youth, they are jobless. unemployment rate 72%. So you can imagine literally everyone I know, everyone is graduating, they cannot find a work. So I was with a group of people and we decided like, we cannot find a work, how about creating works? So entrepreneurship can become a solution that we actually can do. So we started by doing a small initiative to help people get awareness, even within the war, get to understand about entrepreneurship. We did an event, like Startup Weekend event, just to help people gather around and create the business. We sold out in more than 4 hours. For the event. People are desperately wanted to create something. Entrepreneurship for conflict is not about winning, losing, making more money, becoming a billionaire. It's a surviving game. This is the only option that I have. This is what I wanted to do, then actually doing it. That's why we see people in conflict are more entrepreneurial in the spirit, because they are really hustler, they wanted to do. So we created the startups. We help people create the businesses. Then they had to move out of the country because war is getting intense, life is getting harder, there's more opportunities. Also, when I went to the US for work, then I moved now to Germany for work as well. So I wanted to continue the support for people who was still inside the country or outside the country by supporting them, initiating their own businesses, pursuing their dreams, their hope, and be effective. Usually refugees considered as a problem, not part of the solution, but they are a solution by doing their own things.
There is a sort of, do you feel that we're getting to the point where we can talk about refugees as entrepreneurs, basically, just flip the whole conversation around? I mean, I know that Mersal, who started Chatterbox, is second generation Afghanistan. Her parents were refugees.
Well, I guess when she first moved, she was a refugee as well. She arrived in the UK age 4, but I guess she grew up, in her living memory, she's always lived in the UK. But sure, I think watching her parents struggle to find a job, so they were university professors, civil engineers, spoke really good English as well as 4 other languages when they moved to the UK. Her mother was jobless for 10 years, and I think her watching her mother's struggle really inspired her to do what she's doing now, which is, running Chatterbox and trying to help refugees in the UK back into work. And in the UK, the refugee population is more educated and highly skilled than the population average, but way more likely to be unemployed or in really low-skilled work where their talents are wasted. How do we know what refugees want? Do they even want to be entrepreneurs? I mean, I know, you've discussed the entrepreneurial spirit. That's just a survival question in Syria, but actually we found with Chatterbox, people use it for lots of different reasons. People have very different motivations, very different professional aspirations.
So it's not everybody's going to be.
Not everyone's going to be.
What, for the purposes of this conversation, what do we think that the startup tech world could do better in terms of embracing refugees into the ecosystem? You've obviously had a lot of experience doing that. Do you find sometimes kind of pushback? People like, okay, we get the refugee thing, but tell me about the product and that kind of thing. I mean, what do you say to those people? Are you leaning on the optics, or are you? Does the conversation flip into what's the business model, all that kind of startup stuff?
I mean, regarding the startups that we're working with, the Syrians, and Ahmed, as always, is going to correct me if I'm wrong, because I think he obviously knows far more about the situation. But actually, that idea of diving straight into the middle business model is what we would encourage with our teams, because we don't always want to see, the refugee as the forefront of the business idea and of the kind of company that they're launching or the organization. It should be about having a great idea within a wonderful team and having the motivation to drive it through. So I think we shouldn't focus on this conversation of having refugees involved. On the other hand, when we're looking at the refugee crisis, or however we want to call it, the situation that's developed over the past 8 years, and especially living in Europe, I think we're very kind of vulnerable to this situation. And there has been kind of this, I've worked with them, I'm meeting them on a day-to-day basis, this kind of huge ballooning of organizations and entrepreneurship that's surrounding refugees and the refugee situation. And I think from that side, as we all know within the sector, it's so important to involve the end user within the design and within the creation. And also something to think about if we're doing this, I would suggest, is kind of about humanitarian values and why we're designing this. Is it for our own profit or is it for the end user? Are we fully committed to taking it through to the end? Because it's an incredibly vulnerable population we're often working with, and that should be taken into account.
Do you get investors? You have philanthropic investors, of course, but do you also get investors who are more, shall we say, more impact oriented? There's this new field of impact investing where they're looking for like business models, but they're also looking for social impact, social good. Ahmed.
Absolutely. So the reason why looking for investors to look into investing in refugees, not only for impact and investing in base and local contributions or another side, but also what's the number one things that makes entrepreneurs succeed in all over the world? Hustlers. They are hustlers. Being the fact that you left everything behind and you moved out, you're facing every single challenge in the world that you have in terms of integration, learning a new language, understanding a business, legal side, life struggles. You don't have a lot of money because you left most of your money you're spending from your saving. And in addition to that, you're creating a business. This is like those guys that facing a challenge every single day in their life. So not being able to sell out to one of the investors is not going to be depressed for them. That will be normal. Okay, it's fine. They are hustler by itself. So a lot of investors, they see this in refugees businesses. They are hustlers, and they start to become. And numbers start to show. Just one figure, just to guys get you realize how big it is as a business. Refugees businesses in Turkey, there is now more than 8,879 Syrian businesses that are creating as the first. Foreign nationalities creating a business in Turkey. This number is not big enough to know that it's actually starting by 157 alone in 2011. So you have only in 5 years, there is 1,000 times more Syrian businesses that are creating. So those people who's taking the effort to travel, taking the struggle to travel with them, they starting over again, like become very successful businesses. This is only the registered businesses, other than thousands of not registered business that waiting online as a startups. They actually to pivot or maybe make sure they have a great business model before they go and starting businesses. Turkey not alone. You see Lebanon, you see Jordan, you see here in Europe. During the tour that I did, I met more than 350 entrepreneurs.
Does that kind of appear in the media that there are 8,000 Syrian startups in Turkey? Does anybody write about that?
They do. It's official number by the government.
Oh, right.
Not really focusing by in the media. The thing is about media, they follow stories more than actually understanding the impact. Impact is also very hard to understand. You need to analyze it. You need to know how many jobs they're creating, how many businesses they are doing. There's always subjectful in a sense where you do more in that.
And maybe when we're talking about impact, you asked a question about impact investing, and I think that in the businesses that we've seen that have developed from the programs that we've run, quite often they do too. They're a money-making business, but they also kind of solve a problem that the refugee communities themselves are facing, because that's where their innovative space is. So I think that's what's really unique with the startups and with investing in refugee entrepreneurial.
Talking of impact, Leonard, I know you guys are based in the UK, and there was a letter that came out the other week from Refugee Action that said that asylum seekers and refugees, if they're allowed to work in the UK, could or start businesses, could basically bring in £42 million in tax revenues a year. Do you think that the conversation around, the sheer amount of money that a country could make out if it was more accepting of refugee and asylum seekers as entrepreneurs and as business, as and money, generating part of the economy, do you think that argument is starting to win or not?
Yeah, I have so much to say about this. Let's start with the asylum seekers aspect. So in the UK, people with legal refugee status are allowed to work. But if you're an asylum seeker, and the asylum seeking process can take, depending on whether you appeal or not, anywhere between 6 months or even 2 years. And that's a lot of time to spend having to do nothing. You know, even if you're able to live off the really meager, you know,
Handouts.
welfare payments
Yeah.
that you get, it doesn't cater to the very human need to feel useful, and it's very demoralizing for a number of, you know, otherwise incredibly capable individuals who are motivated to work. So at Chatterbox, we do allow asylum seekers to work with us and share their skills online as well. We're legally not allowed to pay them. We pay them expenses, and we use the rest of the money. We give it to organizations who train refugees who speak no English to give them English classes, because the government's been cutting a lot of funding for those programs. So hopefully that then targets the more vulnerable individuals who aren't even able to access the labour market. And just to your point, Mike, again, about waste in the UK economy. So 48 billion pounds, which is basically the same as 48 billion euros now, is wasted each year in missed trading opportunities because of a language skills shortage in the UK. And that's even pre-Brexit, and with Brexit, that will almost certainly get worse. So we're in desperate need of friends, of more language skills, and with Chatterbox, we're showing that refugees are part of the solution.
Well, another thing we wanted to talk about was the gig economy, right? So, gig economy, platform sharing, gig economy, and entrepreneurship. Women being in the gig economy. You know, what do you think? You had some thoughts on that, Lena, didn't you?
Yeah, again, so I think taking entrepreneur out of entrepreneurship, more entrepreneurial spirit. I think the gig economy, which is what Chatterbox offers. I mean, we're looking at more, you know, promotion opportunities within an organization, but fundamentally for the majority of people who work for us, they don't know exactly like how many hours a week they'll be working. It's part of the gig economy. And half of our tutors are women, which I think is quite high for any non-gender specific venture aimed at you know, enabling refugees to access opportunities. And I think part of this reason is because of the flexible hours and the geographic flexibility that's afforded by online work. So yeah, in the majority of cases, if a family's moved, the woman is the primary caregiver for children. That's not unique to refugees. That's the case in the wider UK population as well. So I think that's a really important role that tech has to play for us and you know, any comparable organization.
Do you think? Oh, go ahead, Ahmed.
I just have a quick comment because this is really important. Why it's important to have more female participation. So in order to understand this for refugees, take it where they came from. So usually coming from conflicts, states, unstable states as well. So technically, a lot of the males, they participate in the war, they participate in the conflict, that leaving women alone to support their families. So a lot of females, when they flee out of the country and become refugees, they hold responsibility to support their families on their shoulders. Usually in the Middle East, they don't do that, like traditionally, let's say. But when they leave the country, they feel themselves like obligated now. The only supporters for their families. They start to engage more in employment, engage more in creating job, or maybe starting their businesses. Still, this figure is very low. According to the study that they did, there is only around 70% of female participation in the ecosystem as a Syrian refugees entrepreneur. This is really vary between country to country. So we see in the countries where male are not allowed to work, such as Lebanon, the figure jumped to 35%, dramatically, from 70% average to 35%, because women are like more obligated to find a job and support the family. That's why we need like more initiative to get this more 50%. Supporting female participants, get more and more of the participants, and support for the family and participation in the economy.
So therefore, Kate, do you think therefore it's beholden on gig economy platforms like, you know, ones I would think of like Uber or Careem, I guess, or so platform-based gig economy startups could do more in this space, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. On the other hand, I mean, again, it's a very niche. Like, how how would you go about approaching it as a platform? I mean,
Right.
we've already heard from Airbnb, who have done some amazing things, and they're running a refugee-specific program. And I think there could be some more of these. Careem, which is an app very similar to Uber, they're working with the UNHCR, at least in Jordan, probably in some of the other countries.
So that's actually happening.
Exactly, that's happening. That's happening. I think the platforms can do more to enter into these spaces, but I would say less on a kind of industrial scale, that it has to be the platform that makes the move. And how about more the specialists who are working for these companies, who have years of experience and training, going out and connecting with organizations and saying, hey, listen, can I do anything to support you? Can I mentor one of your students? Can I come in and do a speech where, if you're where I am, that kind of thing. And I think on a personal level, this engagement is sometimes more important than having to turn it into a cooperation kind of beast.
We think, I mean this to anyone, do you think that we can do more as an entrepreneur ecosystem to do more like education, reach out, mentoring? Maybe, I mean, there's kind of like a platform in there somewhere, isn't there? Or has somebody built it already of getting...
I would say with
platform
what
play almost.
Jussor is doing, we don't have a platform as such, but I mean, we're always looking for mentors.
That's one of your...
to connect to. Exactly.
Connect
So
to
if
Jussor,
anyone, if anyone in the room is interested in doing that, and I think just in general, for anyone out there that's launched their own business, they know how incredibly scary that is, and you maybe know kind of one small section of what you're working with, but then there's 1,000. You don't know how to do HR, you maybe don't know how to do financial planning, you don't know how to do advertising and media, you only know like a very small niche, and that's where you need the support and the guidance, and it's so hard for us to provide that. So if you're a specialist, getting involved is definitely a really wonderful idea.
Yeah, totally. Lena, I know that Chatterbox was one of the few startups that managed to appear in the Daily Mail, and they didn't. The Daily Mail, being a very right-wing newspaper in the UK, didn't manage to criticise you. You came off well.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out if that's a really high or a really low bar. But yeah, exactly. They haven't criticized us yet. But I think it speaks volumes that not even they have a bad word to say, because I think what we're doing and what so many ventures here are doing, it just makes sense. It prevents the immense loss of human talent that occurs when you label refugees as a homogenous group, when you discriminate for no apparently good reason against a whole group of people who are otherwise very capable.
Ahmed, you know, in the sort of, tech startup world, people are always talking about culture and how do you become a great entrepreneur and build your team and yada, 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 and all that stuff, all that good stuff, which is probably will go on forever. And doing that from a standing start. I mean, this is kind of why I quite like, I really enjoy the stories that come out of this world, because, this world, the ones we're kind of talking about, because, being a white guy in Stanford University, becoming a startup, it's like, okay, no, no brainer. But being a Syrian refugee and then becoming from refugee from any country, and, who've been through so much personally, and then doing a startup. I mean, that's an incredible. Is there something qualitatively different? Should we make more allowances? With some Jussor probably bumps into some. I mean, you meet many of people who are doing this. What are the different problems that happen? Are there mental health issues to be taken into consideration? What's going on?
I think we can count a lot, but I think if I want to go to the top challenges that refugees are facing based on interviews and the people that we meet every time. First, again, you mentioned the trauma. They've been in a very difficult situation. One of the entrepreneurs I met in Berlin, he was not able to go and attend very important investor meeting because he was trying to call his family for the past 2 days back in Syria and got no answer. Turned out to be just like electricity shortage that regularly happened in the city. They couldn't be able to communicate with them. So addition to that, regulations. So a lot of refugees, when they came, they cannot be able to obtain residency card. They cannot register their work. Probably here in Europe, but still we have refugees based in Middle East. They cannot travel in some areas after 7 p.m. because only they are Syrians. So they cannot be able to go out of countries because they don't have residency card, they cannot establish a company. A lot of refugees, they cannot open a bank account for a certain, in some countries, including here in Europe. So opening a bank account will give you ability to receive funds, receive the money, manage the businesses, have a checkbook, have a credit card. That's all a plug for them. Some of the startups here, as you mentioned, they face a problem maybe going to Silicon Valley because they don't have enough fund. But some Syrian refugees, they cannot be able to travel because there's visa limitation on them, there's restrictions. I work for an American company for the past 4 years. For now, I cannot go now to the US because the travel ban. I hold a Syrian refugee's passport. And on top of that, you have the problems that we can help, we can solve, which is like social inclusion. Some of the startups that we met, they've been rejected by investors because of their nationalities. Just by the door, they like the business, and then where you're from, Syria, go out. That was like end of conversation they heard of. Language barriers. A lot of the Syrian refugees that we met, they starting business, more than 52% of them starting business after 4 or 5 years because they are not, the integration does not happen within 1 year or 2. It takes a little bit of time, which is showing by data. Because they want to learn the language, they want to learn about the business environment, they want to learn about the customer's behavior. It's a new environment for them. They want to connect before they go and establish the business.
I didn't want to end on the challenges. Actually, I wanted to echo something that Ahmed touched on earlier, which was kind of the opportunities. Refugees, obviously not a homogenous group, but have been through often so many kind of life experiences and overcome already so many challenges to be in the situation that they're in, which basically means they're great at overcoming challenges.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
any entrepreneur out there will know is basically what you have to do on a day-to-day basis. And on top of that, the limitation of opportunities means that entrepreneurship is a very appealing field to go into. And that's from one side, and I just quickly want to bring it from the other side, and that's as us as an international community. I think that even anyone that comes to us with a startup idea and has gone through that training from kind of the idea stage to developing a business model to pitching that, the amount of skills that they've developed within that kind of process is incredible. And not only that, anyone that's been inside a startup system at some point knows these levels of enthusiasm and opportunity and hope that are kind of portrayed. It's completely different to anything that I've ever seen. And I think this is a great field that we should all be trying to bring refugees into, because it's almost therapeutic, I would say, in some ways, and also upskilling in that they're thinking a project through, they're gaining financial skills. So I'd love to see more of it, in fact.
Absolutely. Well, that's kind of why we started Tech4Gs. Very much so. What's some final thoughts? What's a big ask? What's an ask that you want from everybody?
I would say everyone try and go out and meet a refugee entrepreneur and ask them how you can help, because we can come up and we can ask you for hundreds of things. We can ask you to be a mentor. We can ask you to support us financially, to give us advice in which kind of directions we should be in. But ultimately, it's not us you're trying to support, right? It's the entrepreneurs themselves. So try and find them. There's hundreds in the Tech4Gs group, and ask them what they need, and then see how you can go about facilitating them gaining
Exactly. Ahmed?
Do the other way around as well. Ask yourself what the small things you can do to support refugees, what steps that you can take it now, and secondly, just do it.
And buy your book in 2 weeks, or
It's
free.
download it.
Download it. It's free.
Where's it going to be?
Probably like everywhere. If you guys are in the Tech4Gs group, we share it there, or you see it on my website. It's in my name, so you find it there.
How do we find it?
AHMAD, like Ahmad, SB.com. So it's like my name. Got it, downloaded it. It's for free. I have it for free.
What's the title of the book?
Entrepreneurship in Exile.
Entrepreneurship in Exile. Look out for it. Awesome.
Okay.
And what do you guys need right now?
So right now we're looking for talented marketers and investors for future conversations, and mainly to any social startups looking to include refugees. I guess just never lose sight of what they want.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for listening to the panel.